Okay, so for some of the people out there who don't know, I make really gross music. It's just disgusting. It's distorted. It's awful. But it's a lot of fun to make, right? And Chris makes very ethereal stuff, which is kind of like the yin and yang kind of concept, right? It's ethereal, it's big, and I've wanted to try to dive into your style, but I just personally, I don't know where to start. Everything I put distortion on it, I make it gross, disgusting harmonic minor scales and just make you throw up in your ears, right?
Yeah.
It sounds good to me, but how do you make ambient? Like I've tried and I was like, what's my tempo? 180? But no, it's gotta be slower than that, right? Like how do you start an ambient track?
Well, I think the first thing people should know is, number one, age doesn't matter. You know, I mean, a lot of people who are like, oh, like I'm too old to learn how to do something new, or I never had formal background training, but like ambient is something that you can approach at any time, at any point in your life, because it is an intellectual activity, right? You're sort of like diving into this unknown world. And I don't think you should be, held back if you feel like you're, not of age. Maybe this is something that young people do. I didn't get into it until I was in my mid 30s. So like I had no question that like, wow, this is the right thing for me to do. I looked and there was artists that were older than me and there was artists who were younger than me. Like everybody was doing it. So I was like, okay, well, this is something that I, feel called to do. So, that would be the first thing, is just kind of get over your fears of what ambient is. And then after that, you can start experimenting, like
there's always like a younger person that's like, I always tell people that if they're like, I'm getting pretty good at guitar or whatever it is. I'm like, yeah, there's a kid on YouTube that's half your age and way better than you. So age has nothing to do with it.
It works the same way. I mean? It's not just ambient, like music in general. You know what I'm saying? Like in my career as a guitar teacher, like I taught people who were like 6 and then I taught people who were like 85. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a wide range of people who were like coming to me saying, I really always wanted to do this, no matter how young or old. Of course, it's like, like kids are sponges and they can like pick up stuff like really quickly, but like,
over the weekend, they're like, I can sweep now. Look at this.
But ambient is not like it's not like a physically demanding activity. You don't have to be dexterous like you do with other instruments like piano or guitar or something like that, or drums. Like you can do it. And especially now with the modern tools we have. So that's the thing. So the second thing would be, obviously, figuring out what type of sound you want to create, like
a soundscape kind of thing, or do you just do like
figuring out like what artists you want to start to emulate at the beginning, or what style of ambient that you're really going for. I think that's huge. It's not like you have to have a set path, but I think like having maybe a pool of like a couple tracks or a couple different artists that you really enjoy, and then trying to like pick up cues from them on how you could start, you know what I'm saying? Whether that's like,
do you ever like, so when you're approaching a new track and then whenever I'm making something, comes a point where you're listening to it and then you almost hear something that's not there. And then that's when you start adding things, right? Like you're listening back, you're like, okay, maybe the hi-hat should do this or something like that. And then you start adding things like, does that happen to you in ambient kind of thing? Because that's just my normal stuff. So
all the time. And that's one of the reasons why I save, I work in MIDI. For those of the viewers who don't know, like MIDI is musical instrument digital interface. Like I work in these MIDI notes, right? Which is, and I work in a DAW, which is non-destructive. So I could just save one version and completely remix that version or completely redo it with no consequence. Back in the old school days, I'm sure before MIDI and, analog style, like it was like you had one take, you recorded it and that was it. You know what I'm saying? Even with the early days of the synthesis, it was like you recorded it on tape and that was how you recorded it. Like I get it. I used to record albums on tape. Like it's no joke. But nowadays, like, especially with MIDI and with presets and saving and all this kind of stuff, like I work in mostly a digital environment. I do have hardware synths around here. I got my Hydra synth. I got, other hardware that I use. And you can save presets internally on the actual synthesizer. But like now, like with software synthesizers and, it's like I leave the MIDI there until I'm absolutely ready to like move on to the next stage. So
do you print stuff to audio or do you bounce to audio at some point? Because I never really do that. I don't, for some reason, I don't like committing to things like that. I always kind of like leave it in MIDI until my CPU is just about to freaking crash. And then I'm like, okay,
that's kind of the way it is for me too. Honestly, I leave it in MIDI for a while until I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like I have a worthy enough CPU that it's going to hold that, at least it's not going to start chunking or start digitally distorting or something. But I try to leave the MIDI there, at least even when I'm start the mixing phase, I'll duplicate every single track that I have, and then I'll freeze half of them, freeze the half that I just made, and then I'll tuck the other,
right. You're an Ableton,
all the MIDI
right?
away. I'm an Ableton.
Okay, yeah.
And you can do this in any DAW. So I tuck the MIDI away in a folder or like a track group, and I'll deactivate all those tracks.
Ableton does make it nice though.
Yeah,
like
so essentially the MIDI
is pretty cool.
Right, so essentially the MIDI is there. It's just hanging out, doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? While I work on the audio if I'm in the mixing stage. So that way, because sometimes I'll go, oh, that filter was a little too open, or that sequence just peaked out a little too much on the high end, and then I'll go back and I'll grab that MIDI track, I'll pull it back into the session, and I'll just like tweak it and then rebounce it to audio, and then keep working like that. So.
One thing I was curious, one of our episodes we did, and I forget which one exactly, but you're like, I'll be the first to tell you that you can put a kick drum in ambient.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what does he mean? So is it like a rule? Like there's not really drums in ambient, it's just kind of like soundscapey, but you can put drums or rhythm.
Listen, I'll be honest with you. When I first started making ambient music, it was 2012. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. He's like, have you ever heard the music of Solar Fields? And I'm like, yeah. And then like, yeah, I heard Solar Fields before, but then we started talking about it, and it was just like, I realized in that moment during the conversation, I was like, damn, I should be making this kind of music too. Like, I don't know why. It was just like lightning bolt moment. Not everybody has these lightning bolt moments, but like, that's what it was for me. And so when I first started making ambient per se, like I had no conception about the genre or anything like that. It was just like, make music, right? And the first experiments that I did not have a kick drum. But then I started to get into that sort of chill aspect of it. And I'm like, I started adding kicks and hi-hats and things like that to my music. But I was still calling it ambient. I was still like, this is ambient because it's so driven by pads. I was using Alchemy and all these other kind of synths at the time. And, I started developing this sound, and it was an organically driven process. Like I didn't have any conception of what the sound was. I just made the sound. And the sound ended up to have a rhythm to it. And I still consider myself an ambient artist, even though S1gns Of L1fe stuff is, it's beat driven, I guess you could say.
Interesting. But, so you can't have rhythm. It's not like a rule. Like you can't have any rhythmic elements, And now that I'm much more versed in what ambient is, I think it's a wide net, if that makes sense. Like there's a wide array of different, like, subgenres and things like that. And, but I do think like, it's important to be specific about what style that you're creating at the time. Like you can't have a mishmash of things that come together. Like if you're going to create chill in a track, you know what I'm saying? If you're going to create drone. Don't try to mix up these different styles in one. Just keep it, you know what I'm saying? Like keep it in a lane and then go with that. That's true. I tried to do that with I was like, okay, I come from a metal background, and then I want to do something with synthesizers and also make it disgusting equally as well, right?
Yeah.
So I tried to mix analog sounding drums, like an actual drum kit, with synthesizers, and it's surprisingly difficult, right? Because with an analog drum kit and guitars, it works, right? It's like the rock band, metal band sound, and it just flows together. But once you mix like completely just an analog kit and with no electronic kits, it sounds weird, and it's kind of hard to bridge that gap because, when we have synths, you want those like pounding kicks or those pounding rhythms in there. And that was kind of difficult. So I kind of see what you mean. Like once you kind of just stay in your lane a little bit, it kind of makes it a little bit less Frankenstein, I suppose. Yeah.
So going back to advice for beginners, I think starting out, just start, putting down some experiments. I'll also be the first person to tell you that you can 100% use presets at the beginning of your career. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
If you're just starting out, like, I would say, Luftrum, I'm going to give a shout out to my friend, Soren from Luftrum Sound Design. His presets are top quality
They're pretty
presets.
Wild, dude. I know. I've listened to them.
They're so good.
Yeah.
And I met Luftrum early. I met him in 2013. I actually took a freaking chance. I invited him to come to Finland with me. I barely even knew the guy. I was like, hey, we're having this thing in Finland. Do you want to come? Because he's in Denmark, which is kind of close by. And I'm like, yo, just like come out there and like talk about sound design.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, I'll go out there. Like, and he was so generous with his time, and he flew all the way out to Helsinki, and he met us there.
That's awesome.
And he's such a great guy. Like he's just such a really nice, personable guy. He's been very generous with me with his advice and his time. And eventually I started making sound designs for him, which is kind of like one of my like bucket list goals.
That's
was
cool.
To like make it onto Luftrum's label. But anyway, aside of that, right? He makes really great presets that you could get started with to like, venture off into whatever, subgenre you want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we also have our stuff we do on Material. And that's another great resource, right? There's all kinds of great resources. So starting with presets is cool because it gives you that idea of what the sound is supposed to sound like, right? Because presets are mostly polished, and being a preset designer myself, like I try to like make it sound as good as I possibly can out of the box. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And then after that, after you kind of get that down, you go, okay, like what is creating this sound? Like, what are the steps that it takes to get to this sound? You know what I'm saying? You can start by just like, number one, removing the effects off of the synth you're using.
It's such a good learning tool. I mean,
it's a great learning tool. Yeah.
People, for some reason, they kind of look down for some reason on presets, right? They kind of see them as, some people say they see them as cheating, but I don't really think so, because at the end of the day, music is music, and you can also really use them to study from.
Yeah,
right. Because there's some weird presets. You're like, how the hell is this thing made? Somebody turned the right combination of knobs to make this weird sound. And then what's, like you're saying, turn off the effects. Okay, what's the oscillators doing? Okay, they're doing this. What's the filter doing? What modulators are changing the sound like that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, after you watch an LFO do its thing for 20 times, you go, okay, I can kind of get the drift here. Like, what is this LFO doing that makes this sound so special? And that's why synths with a mod matrix are such a beautiful thing, because you can actually see all the different routings, And
a good mod matrix is that, because they're not
a
all
good mod
equal.
matrix, a good mod matrix. And I used to be totally confused by it. I'll be honest, like I was like looking at mod matrix, like, I don't know what these routings mean, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And sometimes I'll even one of my favorite sound designers is Peter from Echo Season. And I'm even confused by some of his routings sometimes. I'm like, this is so complicated. I don't even know where these are going or what this even means.
There's some wild ones, yeah.
There's some wild ones out there. And I'm like, dude, like, whoa, okay, like you go off, bro, right?
Dude, like the Howard Scar ones and Zebra too. Those are kind of wild as well.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Zebra is actually one of the more confusing mod matrices out there, I think.
Is it? Oh, interesting.
Well, you're so good at it. I mean, you know backwards and forwards, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
It's not, I would say Zebra is probably one of the more difficult synths to program.
There's a lot of stuff in that one.
Yeah. Well, outside of that, that's a different topic for a different day, right? So it's
I do want to ask, like, if someone's just starting out, right, and we're like, okay, presets are pretty cool. That's a good way to go. But the question comes, what synthesizer they're going to pick from? Because there's so many out there. I mean, at the end of the day, they kind of all do roughly the same thing, right? They design sound. But the interfaces, I think, is a very big thing, because you have to be comfortable in whatever you're using. Same with your DAW, right? If you feel weird in your DAW, you don't like it, it's probably not the one for you. You got to feel good in it. Where should a beginner start? Like, what synth should they go for?
Well, number one, it's a big one. It's a big one, because you really want to get started off on the right foot, so to say. You want to have a good basis to go off of. And obviously, if like budget isn't a thing or budget is a thing, that's obviously a consideration, right? You have,
should be probably the first one.
Right. If you're just starting out, you don't want to spend money. It's like, like starting any other hobby in life.
Starting with Omnisphere. Here we go. That could be tough.
I'm serious. Like there's been many times in my life where I've been like, I want to really get into this. Like, where should I start? You know what I'm saying? And you could name 10,000 other activities, and it would be like, there's the basic stuff that you need, and then there's more like specialized equipment that would be helpful for you later on in your journey, right? Anything from hunting and fishing to golf to, cars, like whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever you get into, there's going to be a level, there's going to be a barrier of entry, right? So obviously starting at the free tier is probably the best option for somebody who's just starting out, right?
So one of the first ones that come to mind is going to be Vital. I'm sure people saw that coming. Or also Surge XT is surprisingly good, but I would say that if you're just starting out, the interface might take a little bit of time to learn. It's a little bit of a curve. So maybe Vital's probably more approachable in that sense. I think
Vital's probably the most approachable synth. I mean, there's other ones. Odin I've used before.
Odin, that's right.
Right. There's other synths out there. But Vital, because Matt is such a good UI designer, I think Vital really changed the game of like what a free synth could be.
You can grow with it too. I mean,
you can grow with it.
Sky's the limit with that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, because he really, that was his, I talked to the developer of Hyperion. He's just a great guy. And he actually he knows Matt. And Matt actually came from a UI design background. So he brought all that UI experience to Vital. And that in itself kind of tells the story about how Vital like got its roots, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And why it's so easily accessible for beginners, because he really spent the time not only to make a good sounding synth, but to make it like accessible and usable.
And it looks good. Like I do appreciate the 60 frames per second. I don't know if that's talked about a lot, but that's very nice.
It's not talked about a lot, but it's such a huge thing. Like, you know, like just being able to like pull over and drag those handles of modulation to anywhere super fast is like really helpful, especially, you know, for me who designs presets for it, or somebody who's just like trying to start out to figure out like, okay, what's this envelope doing, or where's this envelope going?
What's this envelope doing?
You know, and it has a mod matrix, and he changed the game with a mod remap. Like we had never seen that before on any other synthesizers. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. It's where, you know, every modulation in every modulation list, everything has a mod remap where you can like actually modulate the modulation.
Oh, right. I mean, Zebra does have that. It's crazy.
Like you have another separate drawing window that you can like draw like different curves in there to like vary your modulation up. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. We should have talked to Dash about that in the Dash episode. But anyway, so yeah, obviously that's the first one. You know, you start with Vital, start with things like that. When you get up towards the paid tier, Fab Filter has a great synth. It's called Twin 3. That's another basic synth, you know, that you could get started with. But then, you know, I get asked the question all the time, why do I need Serum? You know, why do I need pigments? You know, what do these synths have that are like advantageous over Vital? You know what I'm saying? And the answer to the question is not much, but you're going to find yourself after using Vital for, 6 months, you're going to be like, I wonder what else is out there. You know what I'm saying? Like
that's true.
And that's where gas kicks in. That's where the gas level is. You know what I'm saying? Like that's where you reach that point where you're like, okay, like, do I need more gear? And that's what gear acquisition syndrome stands for. It's like, it's gas. It's like, okay, like I need that sound. I need to reach that sound. Because you hear the sound in like, say, a Martin Sturzer record or a Solar Fields record or somebody like that. And you're like, I hear that sound. How do I get that sound? Right?
He uses this plugin.
Yeah, he uses this plugin. He uses this synthesizer. I mean, Martin literally plays to an audience of 500 people with a wall full of synthesizers. And you're like, well, if I just got a Virus, TI, if I just got like a Waldorf M, if I just got this, that, any synth that he has, it's like, wow, that's that sound, right? And the trapping is, I need to spend this much to get the sound.
Yep. It's
when in actuality is, you could recreate that sound with Zebra. You could recreate it with Hive 2. You could create it with Pigments. You could create it with Vital. There's much less expensive options.
Right.
Yes, they don't have all the knobs and all the switches and all that. They have that feel. But there's a huge, difference between composing something in analog equipment versus composing it in software. At least for me.
Yeah, I think it's a different vibe, a different feeling, right? Different, I guess UI, for lack of a better term. Like your UI is going to be real life in analog gear, but I think people overlook, for example, like how much time Martin's spent in actually learning, and they don't see all the hours he's sitting there. Okay, moving this knob. What does this do? Oh, that's okay. There's a sweet spot for a resonance or something like that. Like people just look at the instant results, right? They say, oh, maybe this person's talented or this person is talented. It's like, no, not necessarily. They just spent so much time of their lives into practicing their craft that they've just naturally gotten good. Yeah. Because I kind of don't really believe that a talent is really a thing, right? Like people who are really good at their stuff, they spend so much time in learning and crafting and learning and crafting. So I guess in that sense, how you're kind of going back for those different ones, which one is this and which one is that, right? I think it's a lot of it's the time spent learning the software and then learning how everything works, like just the sound design aspect behind it. Because you can make a great sound in Vital as you can with 3X oscillator in FL Studio, right? It's a little bit more basic, sure, but you can still make some great sounds. It's the skill at the end of the day and the vibe of the interface, I think.
Right.
Too.
So speaking for myself personally, outside of Omnisphere 2, none of my synths cost over $200, right? Yeah. None of them do. They're all like under that $200 like line, the magic $200 number, right? So I use those tools, and believe me when I say this, I use Serum on almost every single record that I make. Every record. I use Serum on every record. And people go, oh, Serum's an old synthesizer, but it still sounds good, right? I can get the sound that I want out of it quickly, fast, and it's super easy to use for me because I've gotten so used to it. So if you just like like that's where it ends for you, right? Then it's just a matter of figuring out, okay, how can I program this synthesizer to like make the sound that I want to make, right?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, it just comes down to three basic things. It comes down to the synthesizer, the quality of the synthesizer you're using, right? Reverb and delay, and that's it. Like you know what I'm saying? Like you just
right, yeah.
You just dial it in until the point where you can get really comfortable with just a couple effects and your actual sound source, and then you're rolling.
Sometimes it's much simpler, right? Even look at the analog synths back then. I mean, they didn't have the crazy amount of modulation and endless effects that we have now, right? It was like reverb, delay, like you're saying, and maybe some chorus, and call it a day, and they can make some great sounds that way.
No, this is a really good point. Okay, so I had some really good synthesizers in my studio last year. I have this partnership with S1gns where I can just kind of like try out some synths for a while, show them on the channel and things like that. I had and I was public about this. I said, I have some really good synths in my studio right now. Number one was the Trigon 6. The sequential Trigon 6 was freaking amazing. That synth was like, wow. But I found myself going, oh, I wish I could do this. I wish I could do that. Because the routings are all right there on the main panel. And it's like every routing that you could possibly imagine is right there on the panel. But that's all you get. There's no hidden routings. Right. There's no like, oh, what if I wanted LFO2 to do this? None of that, right? There was only one LFO, I think. And so it's like, you know, like, and that's a $3,500 synthesizer. Right, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's a really expensive synth. And yes, like when I hit the first chords and the first notes and turn up the unison, it sounded freaking gorgeous. I was like, wow, this thing is badass. But like, do you really need that? You know what I'm saying? Like, are there other tools out there? And that's one of the reasons why I love my Hydrasynth so much, because it's one of the first pieces of analog gear it's not analog, but the first pieces of like actual hardware that I have that I'm like, it does what I want to and more. You know what I'm saying? Like it has enough routings that I'll never get bored of that. It's got 5 LFOs. It's got 5 envelopes. Damn. Right. And I'm like, yeah, like I love the fact that I could just like let my mind keep on imagining, you know, what's possible. You know what I'm saying?
And it kind of makes you more creative too, I think, in a weird way.
Yeah. And Pigments is the same thing. Like I feel like I don't get bored of Pigments because there's enough, there's enough modulation options there. You have the MSEGs, you have the randoms, you have the combinator. I mean, that gets wild. That gets wild, right? So it's like, dude, I don't need any more modulation. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, we're kind of getting off topic, but at the same time, like make your choices based on what, you know, like just start small and then keep going from there. You know what I'm saying? You'll naturally know if you need a Hydrasynth at some point. You'll naturally know if you need Omnisphere 2 or you need... That's a good
point, actually. Like you will know at some point.
You will know. You'll be like, okay, like I'd really love to have a granular synth in my studio. Right. And
one thing I wonder too, that I used to read on forums and stuff when, you know, people starting out, like there was this old video from I think like the late 70s or 80s. And it's like this synth school and this guy's going over old synthesizer. It's like an hour and a half long. It's really cool. Maybe if I can find it, we can link that. But it kind of made me think, right? So how should we learn? You know, we're picking Vital, we're picking maybe Serum. And when I first started getting into it, I had like Citrus and Harmor. And those were kind of difficult in the beginning because the interfaces were just not really conventional, I suppose. And I kept reading on forums, okay, if you're a beginner, you should stick to one synthesizer and just learn the in and out. But for some reason, maybe that works for everybody else, but for some reason it couldn't work for me. I'll spend like a week in Harmor. I'm like, okay, I'm sick of this one. I'll go to Citrus. I'll play that. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm sick of that one. Then I'll go to the other FL synths. And I just kept circling back. But every time I came back around to the beginning, I would know a little bit more about that one. It was just an endless cycle and I kept learning more. Did you do that at all? Or did you just stick to one? And
I did. And you know, the more I got into like actually learning sound design, the more comfortable I felt on all of my synthesizers. You know what I'm saying? Like it was it was like learning a language almost. Like, you know, you learn the language of sound design and then you can apply that to any other synth. Like I could approach any synthesizer nowadays. As long as if it's based on the knowledge that I have, right, I'll feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? There are like some really unconventional synths like in VCV Rack where I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Like,
what is this? Yeah.
What is this? Like, this is crazy, right? But that's because people have thought outside the box and it works a different way. Modular is a completely different thing, right? So outside of that, like, yeah, like learning the basics. I mean, you and I are, that's what we do. We teach people how to use synthesizers. We teach people how to make music, right? So the topic isn't like, oh, where do I go to like learn this stuff? Because you have it right here. Between Jon and me, it's like, okay, you can just watch any of our channels and like get all the knowledge you need.
Take some time off work.
Right, take some time off work, go through our videos, that kind of thing. But outside of that, like applying that knowledge is something that's really important. Like learning how to make a proper, like make the envelope do what you want it to do. You know what I'm saying? Make that filter, find that sweet spot of that filter. Where is that sweet spot? Then you can
appreciate that nuance, right? Of the different filters, how much the resonance moves and.
Right. Like exactly. Like where is that sweet spot and what's the type of sound that I want to create? Maybe my filter is too, if you try to experiment, maybe my filter is too open. Maybe I need to close it down a little bit, add a little bit more reverb. You know what I'm saying? Things like that, they come with time and experience,
Yes, absolutely. And there's this technique that it really helped me, especially in the beginning. So like, let's say you want to learn Vital, you want to learn Serum, whatever it is, whatever synth you end up picking, every single day for an entire month, make 3 different presets. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be good, but at least try to complete it as best as you can. And also every time you make a preset, maybe use something different. Maybe instead of using a chorus here, maybe use just a couple of delays or a reverb or whatever it is, right? The next patch, maybe instead of just using saw waves, maybe use a saw and a square. So every single day, 3 patches a day. And by the end of that month, compare those presets to the ones in the beginning of that month. And you're actually going to be surprised how much better you've gotten. And that just takes 1 month. It's just every single day. That's the thing. That's the consistency. You can't skip a day, even if it's the morning, the night. Sit down on your computer or your synth, whatever it is, and do 3 sounds and finish them every single day.
It's like doing the January thing. Yeah, I've never done January before.
What is that? What's January?
January is where you make a song every day in the month of January.
Holy.
And that's the month we're in, and we totally missed the bus on that one.
Oh my! So like a full track every single day.
Yeah, it's like, or full video or something like that. I think or a sketch every day. Like, oh my God.
Come February, you're gonna be burnt out.
Yeah, I know that's the thing. Is like if you're forcing yourself to do that, that's great.
A whole track. That's a lot of work.
Oh yeah,
in a day. Yeah. Like you also have to do like life things too, right?
Well, to each their own, right? Anyway, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's really important just to kind of like build your skills up to a point where you feel comfortable. You know what I'm saying? You'll be surprised how fast things actually evolve. Like how fast your progress is if you just like tuck away. Now, some people work differently. Some people work like, I'm going to work on this one song until it's absolutely finished. I personally am not like that. Like
I've become like that.
Really?
Oddly. I used to be exactly like what you were just saying, like you have a couple different projects, but now I'm like, I have to finish this. There's this book I read and it's like spend 30 minutes every single day. I'll link it down if I remember the name of it, but it's like spend 30 minutes every single day on this track and don't move on from it. Stay with this track and finish it. And that way you kind of just start pumping out stuff. And then I was like, okay, let me give this a shot. And it surprisingly worked quite well. So
interesting.
It might work different for different people.
I found that was a problem for me at the beginning of my production career. Was I would start like I love the beginning of a project. Like I love the initial spark of it.
It's the romance phase.
Yeah, well, it's just like, wow, cool. This is something new. I love making new sounds. And then I would have problems like coming back and like finishing that track. So what I would do is to sort of combat that. I'd be like, okay, I like have, a set of like, if I start 8 tracks, eventually if I keep working on those 8 tracks, eventually I'm going to come back around to 1 again. And then I'm going to push myself to keep making progress on 1 and then go to 2 and so on and so forth until I come back around 1 and I'm like, you have to, because to get to that point, like I think there's different stages of the production journey, right? There's like the first initial stage, you get all the sounds going, you lay it out, and then there's that like kind of middle arrangement phase, but then there's the really difficult like last push.
What is that 90% or that 10%? You know what I'm saying? Like there's that 10% that's like the hardest really to get
me
done.
It may be the last 10%. To me, I think it's the last like 25%, which is like filling in like transitions and like tying stuff together and like making like really cool like arrangement things. That's the hardest part for me.
And that's I would argue some of the coolest parts of the track too, right?
Right.
When you finish a song and then maybe you forget about it a couple months later, and then you circle back to it. You're like, oh, okay, let's put this on. You're maybe driving, and then you forget about all those little cool things that you did, those little automations going through the left and right speakers and stuff like that. and then they come up and it surprises you and like, whoa, that was cool, or that like low impact at some certain spot or thing like that.
So if you can fall in love with that stage of the process, you're going to be a way better producer, or at least in a way better spot as a producer. Because that is the hardest hill to climb. It gets so difficult in that. It
seems so much fun though. Like that seems like, I guess that you have to come to a point where the barrier of like making a sound that you want to make isn't too much there. Like if you want to like make something, like I tell my friend too when we're recording, he's like, oh, maybe we can put that there. I'm like, put what? Do it with your mouth. And he's like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, got it. Okay. Right. And we just put that in the session, put some reverb on it, do some crazy modulation. It sounds cool.
Oh, my gosh.
So that's a really fun part of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, it's different for everybody. To me, that's some of the hardest stuff to do because, you're at the realm of like permanent changes at that point. You know what I'm saying? Like things that you do are going to like have a impact on how the overall sound is going to be. And I try to not get caught up too much in that. Just let things happen, just keep it flowing. And if something really cool happens, great. Honestly, like, I'm just like, all right, just keep on moving forward. You know what I'm saying? So if you can, like I said, if you can like really get into that stuff, it's going to help you because then you're going to finish, then you're going to actually get to the finish line. But the finish line is not necessarily, the production phase. Finish line is actually like finishing your mix. Right. So that's the mixing stage comes next. I get asked a lot about mixing, like what kind
of questions come up for that?
Well, I think mixing to most people is either kind of like mastering. It's like in the realm of like dark arts. Like we don't know how to, like what am I supposed to do, as opposed to like during like just when you're like leveling the track as you're making it. And then what's supposed to come after that. You know what I'm saying? There are different levels of it. I think you can approach it like this. Well, I'm going to have to start doing some serious arrangement tweaks as I'm mixing this. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the reasons why, circling back to the beginning of our conversation, why I don't mix in MIDI is because I feel like, I at that point, once I'm at the mixing stage, it's permanent. Like the stuff that I do is locked in. So I don't want to have a MIDI track that I'm going to actually change or even be tempted to change at that point.
What if we had a fifth up here?
You know what I'm saying? Like when it's done, right? But I see a lot of people in the mixing stage, like unnecessarily putting in a lot of like different plugins or something. I really don't use a lot of plugins when I'm mixing. I just use a utility plugin for some leveling, an EQ and a compressor, and that's it.
Yeah. Same. It's really not, you don't really need all those bells and whistles at the end of the day.
No, you don't. No. If you need to like polish up a sound with an EQ, that's the place to do it, is when it's in audio and it's in that thing. I don't use a lot of insert effects either. I use a lot of send effects. The effects that I need are on my return tracks, So for people who don't understand what that means, it's like I have like a set of like 5 or 6 effects that I go to, and I put those on tracks that any track can be fed into, send and return tracks, right? So I use my reverb and delays over there to like, pipe the same delay into like multiple different tracks.
It's much more efficient CPU wise too, instead of having a reverb and a delay on every insert.
And I think stylistically there is some sort of something to be said about it gluing the track together.
Yes, that is actually, that's a good thing you brought that up, because that's probably one of the most important things. Because before, if you have like a different reverb on different tracks, right? Mm-hmm. On, I don't know, maybe the guitar, you have a hall reverb. And then on some weird synth stuff, you have, I don't know, some weird plate reverb. And then another one is like a different type of reverb. All have different timings and different decay lengths. So you think to yourself, okay, a reverb is meant to simulate an acoustic space, right? Okay, we got that. It makes sense. So why is your guitarist in a bathroom, your synth player's down in the kitchen, and this other guy is, who knows, out in a desert? That makes no sense, right? And I think our brains can subtly pick up on that. So using like maybe 1 or maybe 2, right, is kind of okay. But using all these different reverbs on different stuff is kind of confusing. It really
is. And, reverb to me has a color. Like each different reverb has a different color to it. And I can pick up on that, especially when I'm listening to somebody. Like if somebody has a track where the hi-hats are an obvious different reverb than the rest of the track, dude. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yo, like that doesn't really, like, it doesn't feel natural to me. It feels like the hi-hats are in their own unnatural boxed out space. Yeah,
it's like discontinuous. It's weird.
It's an extreme example, and maybe you don't have hi-hats in your music. Maybe you're just doing something textural. But if something has if you start trying to mix with really short reverbs with really long reverbs, now this can be done, right? But you have to be tasteful about the type of reverb you're using and how it's interacting with that other reverb. Because reverb, if you don't know, is just multiplied delay. Like like if you multiply delay a million times, you're going to get a reverb. You know what I'm saying? That's how those algorithms work. I'm not a programmer. I have no idea how reverb algorithms are built, but I just know that like if you speed up a delay, eventually you're going to get to that point where it's reverb, right? It's just like echoes, you know what I'm saying? So those echoes, they do interact with each other. So yeah, I'd be very careful about that. I use, as far as reverbs go, I love Valhalla's reverbs. I think they're great.
I love fantastic. That thing so much. It's
Sean
so
good. He's an algorithmic wizard who's just a gift to the planet at this point. I mean, he's like, so many people have used his stuff on so many songs. I wouldn't be surprised if like high level producers are using Valhalla Room and Vintage Verb at this point. You know what I'm saying?
I think so, yes, because so I got that one right when it came out, maybe like a month or two after it came out, and I was like, oh, this is a cool name. Let's try it at $50. I was poor. I'm like, okay, deal.
Right.
Bought it and kept it since. And then it was relatively kind of quiet, it seemed. And then when I would start telling people about it, how cool it was a couple of years later, like, oh, hell yeah, I know Valhalla. I'm like, you do? Or is it the same one we're talking about? And then they all know about it. So like at some point, the word got out and like everybody is starting to use, or
so
has
like
used
the Scott Storches of the world, the Rick Rubins of the world, like they're using Vintage Verb. So. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because it's just
maybe EMT or something too, but like
it's
Vintage
just,
Verb probably.
Yeah, so I tend to lean on those. I don't know if you've tried it out yet, but the new FabFilter Pro R2 is freaking smoking, dude. It's so good.
I have not tried anything from FabFilter, and I feel so guilty of it because everybody tells me about it.
I mean, they are, I'd say, boutique plugins. Like all of their stuff is like high end, meaning like it's not cheap. Right. But oh my God, the quality is so good and the interfaces are luscious. They're just really nice to use. So if money doesn't really matter to you, or you're actually at that level where you want high quality plugins, I would highly recommend you check out the FabFilter stuff. This is off topic, but I mean, what I was particularly talking about was their new reverb. It's the sort of the second version of their Pro R, which was their reverb plugin. And it's so good. It definitely fills a hole where, I think Valhalla Room was for me, you know what I'm saying? Like it fills that hole, even though the new algorithms that you and I have both tested out and used in the Inventive Verb are really good.
So good, dude. If you send a sine wave through that, you'll just question life.
That definitely like it was so quick because, Pro R2 had only been out for a couple months. And then Sean came out with those new algorithms. So it was like, okay, now it's back up to par here. So
thank you for telling me about that, by the way. I was on 3 for so long and I was like, yeah, I'm on the newest version. I felt all good. And you're like, dude, there's a new algorithm. So I'm like, what? The dirty plate? I know about the one.
Well, no, me. I'm always on Twitter and I just like, this like see stuff pop up, and Sean's on Twitter too. So
dude, I spent an entire like night with just sending sine waves through the new algorithms with my headphones and just closing my eyes, pondering life and the universe. And if you've ever done that before, just sit down late at night, put a sine wave through Reverb and just play around with it. It's pretty fun. Like it's honestly a good time. I swear to God, dude.
Okay. According to John, just like
you can sneak in some delays if you're getting a little wild there.
So becoming more comfortable with your tools and, going back to the whole mixing thing, like focusing on getting a good mix. Another misnomer that I wanted to address was I see some producers out here who are like waiting to fix their mix in mastering, like thinking that mastering will like fix their bad song or something like that. It's absolutely not the case. I talked about this in a recent blog post on my Patreon. I was like, this is not something that should be waited on. Like you have to fix every issue with your track in mixing. And then mastering is that final level of polish that's just going to excite the harmonics that are already existing in your track. You know what I'm saying? It's not like something where you're going to like, wait to add the high end in mastering or wait to add, more bass in mastering. It doesn't work like that. You have to add everything in the mixing stage and really focus on attention to detail at that point. And then you can like hand it off. And I also said this in my blog post, which was, I don't think you should even master the music yourself if you're the one who mixed it. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot to
be said about that.
Yeah, like because you're so attached to how that sound is, you might be tempted to like go back and try to fix it and then get caught up in this loop where you're never finishing anything. Or
absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So like think about if you can either delegate mastering to an outside source, if you can hire somebody to do it for you, or if you can't do that, then have, at this point, it's 2024, you can have freaking Ozone do it with AI. You can have, like something else, just a tool, like a mastering tool, a mastering suite with presets. You can scroll through the presets and find out which one sounds the best for you. But really, all that's going to do is accentuate what's already there inside of your mix.
Right. Some advice I've told people about that is if they don't have either the budget to do it or they may be just very attached to their music and they want to do it themselves, I'm like, okay, like you're saying, you can get caught in this loop. Some people even put it on the master in their mix session. I'm like, oh, don't do that. You're going to get lost in this.
Yeah, no.
The best advice I would say is once you finish all those tracks, if you have a whole album, once they're done and the mixes are done, they're printed, they're exported in a folder. Do not listen to those for at least a week, maybe more if you can wait. Fresh your ears out. Listen to like a different genre or something like that. Don't even be tempted to listen to it. Then a week goes by and you kind of don't really remember how everything sounds. And then you go to your studio, wherever it is you work. Then you're going to have more of a fresh perspective at that point.
Yeah, right. That's good advice. I mean, I don't tend to do that. I do get my music mastered by an outside source. I have someone else do it who I trust. But if I'm going to master, like because I have mastered tracks myself, I will use just a mastering suite or something like that. You know what I'm saying? You can do it all in DAW. There's some great videos out there on how to do it with free plugins only. But yeah, waiting is probably, just being removed from it. And also listening to your music in different environments helps too. You know what I'm saying? Like listen to it on, your AirPods and your car and like, you know what I'm saying? Like on your headphones versus your speakers. Like there's lots of different ways you can pick out the flaws in your mix before you even get to that mastering stage. You know what I'm saying?
One of the most funs of mastering that I love to do, and it's probably kind of weird, but so, I guess CDs are kind of out of circulation. It's not really a thing anymore, but so when we
just don't use them anymore.
CDs,
we just don't use them.
I know, right? Like burning things to CDs. Remember, like, oh, we're going to burn the CD and listen to it mixed in your car. But anyway,
believe me.
Long story short, right? You have your session of your entire album and you have all your different tracks on different inserts, right? Because they all have to sound cohesive in mastering, right? Like they're recorded in the same area. And the fun part is doing the fade outs into the next song. So like you have your headphones on, you have your speakers on, and you listen to the tail of the reverb as the first song finishes. And then you have that fade out, and then you're like, 1, 2. Oh, here's the next song. You put in a marker, and like, boom, that's where it comes in. So when you listen to it on a CD, it flows right. It's that feeling, and some curves are nice concave, some are a little bit different. That part's so fun to me for some reason.
You're such an audio tweaker, man. You know,
it's so fun, dude. I love it, man. Like, yeah, you hear that concave fade out, dude. Like, yeah, dude. Okay.
Hey, well, that's what people watch the show. All right. So that would be my advice on mixing and mastering. And I think we've covered a lot of things. Now, the other question is, once you finally reach the finish line, would be like, where do you start promoting the music? Like, how do you get your music out there? I get I get asked this question a lot. Like, where am I supposed to go? When I first started, SoundCloud was in its heyday. This was 2012, 2013. Oh,
those are good times.
And SoundCloud was a freaking haven. Like, it was badass. I loved it. There was no ads. There was no like unnecessarily gross marketing on there. It was just the origins.
It seems more active too. Like I guess
it was so much more active. There was so much more community involvement. Now, I'm not just crapping on SoundCloud because I think it sucks. There's still probably a lot of great artists on SoundCloud. And I'm certain, for certain, a lot of people have started their career on SoundCloud. I am one of them. I started my career there, and I met a lot of people there who I still am friends with and I still associate with. That being said, they've done a lot of changes to SoundCloud. SoundCloud almost went bankrupt in 2019.
Yeah.
Like they can. I was almost like cheering from time, like, yeah, do it. Like,
dude, I downloaded all my mixes on there. I'm like, I can't lose these. See, they're so horrible. But
I always thought like if they did sink the ship, then somebody else would have to take over their place, right? You'd have to have another SoundCloud somewhere, and maybe someone could like pick up on that, like how good SoundCloud was, and it's like almost like. These social media platforms, they're like flashes in the pan, right? And we've realized this because we've gotten to test the waters over time.
It's like you remember posting bulletins on MySpace, right? Or new photo comments. Hell yeah, dude.
bro, I was on MySpace. That. I freaking love MySpace. It
was pretty cool.
We'll save that.
And then the online now, when someone's online, it has that little graphic.
Oh, bro, your top 8.
What's up?
Do you remember your top 8? How serious that was?
That was a real thing. I tell people who don't know MySpace about that.
She's in my top 8, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like it was like a thing.
Like if you're number 1 on someone's, that's a big deal.
Oh yeah.
That's a big deal. And it gets in a fight sometimes.
We saw what happened with that. It just like, it was like if you were there in the time, then that was it. Like you saw the best of what you could see and we used it. And then you saw it just go boom. Like I think it was purchased by Fox or something like that. It's like, it went downhill
wasn't it Justin Timberlake?
It went downhill real quick.
Or something. It's bad. It's not what it is anymore.
But okay, same thing. We've watched all these different platforms. So I forgot where we were going with this. Anyway, so we start with we had this great resource to promote our music. Nowadays though, we've seen what happens with like, let's just start with X, IG, and TikTok, right? You have these 3 social media platforms are all competing for people's attention. I don't think Facebook even really matters at this point. It's sort of just like...
Probably not as much.
No, it's just like off in the distance. It's kind of weird. It's when I go on there...
It used to be the new kid on the block. Everyone left MySpace for that.
Everyone left MySpace for Facebook, right? So anyway, but I still see a lot of great things happening on these 3 platforms where people are just sharing the music or sharing their process or sharing some part of their life or something like that. And in that honest, pure way that I remember how it used to be, you know what I'm saying? Because when I used to share tracks on SoundCloud, I'm going back to this metaphor, like I did it out of the purity of like, I just wanted to share it. I just wanted to get it out there. And people would comment on it. And those comments would make me like inspired and motivated.
Especially the timed comments. A comment is 042. Oh, that kick is great.
God,
like, yes, they noticed.
So good. Like
they noticed that.
I love this part. Like that was one of the most magic parts of SoundCloud. Was having those comments, and you could see your comment, that your whole track fill up with all these people who are who are specifically saying, I like this part. This is so gorgeous. I love this. Man,
funky bass line, bro. You're like, yeah, man.
I'm actually kind of shocked that no one picked up on that and no one actually took the ball and ran with it.
That was one of the coolest things, I think.
And maybe that's like a patented SoundCloud IP. Like you can't comment. I don't know. But I know the feeling of what I got from all my friends because I had friends on there. But the thing is what I was going to go back to is that you can never replace the attention that people give something in a certain time. And you can never recreate that either. You know what I'm saying? Like Instagram has had its day. It's had its moment in this. And you can never recreate that peak Instagram experience again. Like we can never recreate the peak in SoundCloud thing. It's never going to happen again. There's no reason why all these people that were at a certain point at a certain time would ever come together again. You know what I'm saying? Unless something in the outside world caused it to change. So regardless of the fact, for beginning producers, I think it's really still a viable option for you to like, not just put your music with a flat, image on the thing there, but like at least like show some part of your life, whether you're just like playing a synth or tweaking a filter or doing something like that and having your music playing in the background or like putting something out there that's going to promote yourself, you know what I'm saying? Or just at least put yourself and have fun with it. That's the part of the process that a lot of people miss is that you're supposed to have fun with it. And a lot of these social media companies have sort of trained us to be like marketing machines and to be like, oh, like you have to be, promoting, like good luck. You know what I'm saying? Because we all know that the biggest freaking cats on the block, the ones who own all the chips, they don't really care about us. They don't really care about the artists who are giving them music. They don't care about who is doing it as long as it gets done. You know what I'm saying? And so in society, when they look at us and they say, hey, you're going to be an artist. Good luck with that. Have fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, good luck promoting your music. Here's some tools that you can do that. How am I supposed to market it? How am I supposed to do this? Like, it's a really complicated process. But what the part that they don't tell you is it used to be fun. It used to be enjoyable because there was no like flooding of ads. There was not as much competition.
Yeah, it's more organic.
If you can fall in love with that part of the process, like just making a video every day or making a new track and sharing a snippet of that track on X or IG or TikTok or something like that, that can be really helpful to get your music.
Almost not more helpful. A friend of mine was telling me about that. He's like, times have changed where back when you could just live off like, oh, wow, that song sounds really good. And they're like, who is this band or who is this artist? And then you kind of look into their life. Now it's a little backwards. You know? Now it's like, ooh, what's that guy playing? That's a cool synth video. Oh, he makes music. Let me go check. Oh, this is really cool.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost backwards now.
And I say this out of reverence and respect for other artists who have done this. But there's a lot of really not so great artists who are really good at marketing their music. You know what I'm saying? Like they're almost overrated in a sense. And I'm like, to me, I'm like, like that's interesting. And this, it's not just music. Like there's a lot of people who are really good at marketing themselves who are like really low on substance. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, that's actually genius, because if you can convince people that you're good at something just by marketing yourself in the right way, you could get anywhere. And social media has also ingrained in us that that's the right thing to do. However, I think being authentic, just being real, it doesn't really matter how old you are, because I see a lot of older people on Instagram now too, and TikTok and these other platforms. Like, just be real. You know what I'm saying? Just be yourself. Don't try to force anything that's not there. You don't have to talk into a camera. You don't have to do anything. Everyone has a phone in their pocket. Every single person watching this podcast has a phone in their pocket, which has a camera, which is way better than the cameras that we had in the MySpace days, which is way better than the cameras we had.
Ball webcams.
Oh my God, dude. Like there's absolutely zero excuses at this point. You know what I'm saying? Like you have a phone, you take it out. Now the question is, how do you sync that music up? That's actually kind of tricky. Like how do you sync your music up to your playing and your performance and stuff like that? That's a whole nother level. Well, what I would suggest is just recording some like random shots of your studio, of you doing the thing, and then putting your music back there. That's enough. You can stop right there. You know what I'm saying? You can stop right there and just say, that's it. You know, maybe some text on the screen, done. Right? And then if you have your music on Spotify, you're having music on Apple, how do you get it there? You use something like DistroKid or an aggregate platform that puts it there for you. If you have a pre-saved link, just start putting that link everywhere. Put that link in your bio, putting that link in the description of the video, putting the link in the whatever, right?
And it's a process too. I mean, I feel like maybe people, once they get to that stage, they put it on Spotify or they upload it somewhere, and then they start thinking, okay, I only got like 5 or 6 views. This is kind of sad. And it's like, well, one, that doesn't necessarily reflect the value of the track itself. It reflects more of a marketing thing, right? So if 5 or 6 people saw it, that means a lot of people didn't see it. Yeah. Right. So don't feel bad that maybe your track isn't good or it's bad, or it could be good, it could be bad. I don't really know, but you can't just judge it based off those numbers, right? That's more of a marketing thing or pushing it out there, right? So if it's just a low number, don't worry about that too much. Just push the next one and learn from those mistakes.
Just think about how much potential is out there too. You know what I'm saying? There's millions and millions of people out there who are waiting to hear your music. Yeah. And listen, 3-4 years ago, it used to be a little bit easier. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, because our timeline feeds that we have in these social media platforms were chronological. And nowadays that's actually kind of rare. So now what you're seeing is everything you see on every social media platform is algorithmic, 100%. You know what I'm saying? Unless it specifically says a latest feed, or this is like a chronological order, or your whole timeline, things like that. Like I said, it's kind of getting outdated at this point. So the algorithm picks up on the content that you provided, right? It's smart. It knows it knows who you are, it knows what you're doing, and it knows what your content is. Therefore, it feeds your content to the people who it thinks that might resonate with your content. And you have to play this game. There's no way around the game anymore. The GAD is the game. You know what I'm saying? And so if that's the game, then all you can do is just put yourself out there and just, you're at the mercy of the algorithmic God at that point. It's like, okay, cool. But at the same time, the focus should always be the music. That's what really matters. So if you focus on getting a good quality product, good music, the people will eventually come. They will eventually find you.
And you'll get better too. Yeah. The more mixes you crank out, the more songs you do. There's something about, I think we've heard it forums or whatever it is, but it's like, you have to really get out all your bad ideas. Just keep making tracks, just keep throwing things at the wall, and you're going to start learning more things. You're going to start getting better. So if it's your first couple of tracks and then you listen to it like, oh, this is awful, that's exactly how it should be. Yeah. And then the next time you're going to get a little bit better, and you just don't stop. That's the thing. Just keep going. Don't give it up. Yeah. I would go on a limb and say Discord is probably the new SoundCloud at this point. Discord has become like such a great haven, going all the way back to like the freaking AOL chat days. You know what I'm saying? Like, yes. You remember that? Like, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Like, you got mail. Like, it's like Discord is still in 2024 ad free. It is a place where normal people can get together and talk. You know what I'm saying? And yes, you have to find the right server. You have to find the right community, but there's so many out there and everybody uses it at this point.
I just hope they don't screw it up. Like I hope they don't mess it up like every other chat service that we've ever had, has ever, I'm sure someone's going to take notice and Discord's going to get bought at some point. You know what I'm saying?
It reminds me a little bit of, so do you remember AOL or the AIM, I guess, AOL Instant Messenger, right? Do you remember that? Okay. So it was like a combination of that plus, did you ever use this old program called Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or any of those? You know what I'm talking about?
I think I missed that one.
It's kind of like if you'd game with other people, right? Yeah, you just join the server and it'd be voice chat. So it's kind of like those two combined, right? You can have your rooms, your chat rooms, you can have voice rooms. It's so nice. And that's actually a good point. It might be kind of like SoundCloud was back in.
Who would buy it though? That's the question. This is totally off topic, but who would buy Discord?
I like it how it is, man.
I like it how it is too. Like, but if somebody like really like not cool bought Discord, they would ruin it fast. You know what I'm saying? And that, I mean, Discord's big enough at this point that it could be a viable option for other people to like look like, oh, we could really use a chat service under our control. I don't want to just put the juju out there, but you know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Oh, I get you.
We have a great server. It's called Synphaera. You can check it out. I also have another great server for S1gns Of L1fe. It's a wonderful community there. I love it. But yeah, putting your music on, Discord to a community is just, it's the same.
And it's great if you're writing music too, because there's a lot of people on there that might know a question or might know an answer to a question that you have. Right. You're having a problem, you load up Serum or Pigments or one of these synthesizers, and there's a very obscure thing you're trying to do, and it's kind of hard to put that in a Google search, right?
No question.
You could just ask in one of these servers, like you can hit up Chris's server and be like, hey, how do I modulate there? So what does a combinate do? And what is that? There's probably going to be someone in there that's like, oh, I'm glad you asked. Let me tell you. You know what I mean? Or maybe some doc questions or something like that.
Yeah, I'm on there every single day. So, I mean, start to finish, that's pretty much the process, right? You just, you start at the very beginning, build your way up, every single step of the way. Like, there's always people out there to help you. I have found that the ambient community is probably the most helpful community I've ever been a part of. You know what I'm saying? And everybody's really willing and generous with their time and willing to offer help whenever it's needed. Producers are the kindest people I've ever encountered in my life. And it goes across anything I've ever done. As soon as I found this whole like interconnected network, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's funny how, light attracts light, and it's just like, I don't know, like you just feel like, you're part of this bigger thing. And I'm not just talking about like, ambient per se. I'm talking about just the community of music producers, who are out
they
here.
Put in the hours and sat in front of the computer, sat in front of their instruments and just put all that time together to learn. And it's a long path. And I think it kind of humbles you in a certain way. Yeah. And it comes to a point where there's a couple of producers out there who will, get questions or something, and they'll kind of like, oh, no, you don't want to learn how to do that. And they'll kind of like prevent people from learning certain tricks or techniques or something. And that's kind of dumb, right? I think at some point it's just information. If someone has this cool filter motion that's going like left and right through the stereo and they're trying to figure out how to do that, let them know that, that might be, they might discover something in turn of doing that also might create another timeline of learning more weird sound design stuff, right?
I wanted to talk about this on the podcast. We are at the precipice of a time when artificial intelligence is going to be pretty much ingrained into most aspects of our lives.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like it's happened yet, but it's starting to happen. And that includes music. And we've talked about this on the show before. Like, what is the role of artificial intelligence and where do we see it going from here? But what I will say is there's always going to be a market for and a need for us to do it the analog old school way. There's always going to be a value. As much as things get automated, there's always going to be a value in authenticity. You know what I'm saying? Like, absolutely. So for example, if you have, artificially created art, then the value of art that's created by humans is going to go up. Because people are like, wow, you made that painting. You know what I'm saying? You didn't have AI just draw you a brush style painting. You freaking painted it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you didn't have AI just build you a soundscape with some cool, like, bells and whistles. You made that soundscape. You know what I'm saying? Like, you built that from scratch. So I think there will always be a need for us to create things, from our minds, from our own hands, no matter how prevalent in the next 20 years AI gets. And I'm sure it will be. It'll be everywhere, and we'll be able to just like wake up in the morning and you will be in just overwhelmed with AI everywhere, and that'll be great. And it'll be like, wow, it'll be so much more efficient, and you can do things so much faster. But at the same time, doing something from your own skill and your own human hands and everything like that will still be valued, and it'll still be satisfying. You know what I'm saying? I think so too, yeah. It'll still be something that you really want to like aspire to do. So that's why I always encourage people to like get involved, get going, start your music career. It doesn't matter what time you start. It just do it. Just start it.
It might even help you out a little bit too, because I've kind of noticed on YouTube for AI, for example, people will upload videos and they'll have the AI voice, and they do sound good and they do kind of sound convincing, but I can pick them out pretty good at this point now, right? Yeah. It's just the cadence of how they speak. It sounds like a real person, but you can just tell there's a difference there. And at some point, people can get fatigued of like, oh, it's an AI voice, next video, and I think that could happen in music.
Yeah, well, you know what? Listen, I stand here in 2024, as I'm bearing witness to my own self. Like, I am a real person. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm
just wait till 3034 comes around. You're going to be like AI robotic.
Well, I'm talking about 2044, bro. By the time we reach there, like, you know what I'm saying? Like in 20 years, like we might not be the same versions of ourselves that we are now. But at the same time, I'm just, like there'll always be, you can never replace authenticity. I don't think you can.
Absolutely.
I don't think you can't do it. It's just something is going to be part of us forever. So
I was like, I almost said if Leonardo DiCaprio came back, but if Leonardo da Vinci came back and paid it something, it would probably be worth Kawhi.
We don't need another DiCaprio. You know what I'm saying? One is enough.
One is more. Yes.
But if Da Vinci came back, oh my God, like that would be a revolution. Anyway, so that's a little bit off topic, but I think that, just keep on, pushing yourself forward no matter what. That's my best advice. And,
Yep. You got to go through the timeline, the pipeline.
Yeah.
You got to get your DAW, you got to get your synth, whichever one you pick, right? Sure. Whether it's Serum, Pigments, Vital, whatever it is. Work with it, start making your songs, check out the presets, don't feel bad about using them. And then just construct a song from beginning to end, export it, maybe do some mastering yourself or send it out to somebody else, depending on how you want to do it. Put it out there on the internet if that's what you want to do, if that's how you want to promote it. If you don't, if you just want to keep it for yourself personal, that's fine too. But go through that process again and again. And every time you come back to the beginning and go through it, you're going to learn something a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's never been a greater time to be a music producer, ever. In human history, there's never been a better time. And I wasn't around.
Do whatever you want to do now.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want to do now. Now, I'm not speaking out of ignorance. I know that there was some really great renaissances over the course of our human history, but like we've never had the tools that we do right now. You
could literally modulate like the 34th partial of a source of a sound saw wave,
right? Or you could have you could have like a whole orchestra at your disposal with all the nuances and all the little like intricacies of every single part of that orchestra at your fingertips. You know what I'm saying?
You can carry a studio in your backpack.
Right. You can carry a studio in your backpack, an entire studio. We've never had that before. And not only that, have the power to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like the processing power to make these things real. It's freaking phenomenal. Like the new, like Apple's new chips that are like, that are just inside of these small little like MacBooks and stuff like that's really powerful computing right there. And so, the the plugins themselves haven't advanced that much, but the processing power has gotten way better.
And so, God, exponentially.
When I first started running Serum versus now I'm running Serum, like it's night and day. You know what I'm saying? Omnisphere, same thing. Like when I first started using Omni to now, the processing power is so much greater that I have. So you can just run more instances of it. You can run more layers. You can do the multis, you know what I'm saying? All this kind of stuff. So just get started and get going. There's really no excuse at this point. Just like, just let it happen. Just make it happen. And
especially on synthesizers that are really good optimized, like if you have a Hive, for example, and a really good computer, man, you can run so many instances of Hive and just make crazy things.
Yeah.
Just endless.
Yeah. So, I mean, even if you have a crappy computer, I think you can still, the plugins have become better. So you can,
That's one thing, actually circling back to the GAS thing, the Gear Acquisition Syndrome, such a weird acronym. But like, that's kind of a good point where if you have more of a lower end system and you can't run some of these crazy plugins, then that might be a reason to maybe go for a Hive, for example, right? Because it's a little bit easier on the CPU, so you can do a little bit more with it. That would be, I guess, a viable option.
Yeah, for sure. I tried out the new multi-core in Pigments this morning.
Yeah, man.
It was good. I was like, okay. I noticed maybe a 3 or 4% like, drop in CPU. I was like, okay, cool.
Were you doing granular stuff or?
I was just doing, I was trying some granular stuff.
Okay, that'll hit it pretty hard.
Well, I was trying to see the difference, right? I was trying to flip on and off, like see what would happen.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So that's cool. I mean, it's getting better, and pretty much every CPU that ships now has multi-cores in it. You know what I'm saying?
I do like that, because I'm sure there's been points for you where you're making this one patch, right? Maybe both engines are granular. You have some crazy effects and reverbs, long tails. And then you see the CPU spike. I'm like, oh my God. And then I'll have to, I make a video on it. I'm like, God damn it. My CPU is like crapping out.
I've choked my system many a time. You know what I'm saying? Out of my own volition and not, you know what I'm saying? Like I didn't mean to do it, but then it happened. I did try to do it on purpose and it happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, these tools, I mean, like we just said earlier, like they're really complicated and they're very complex. And the stuff that you're doing and the processing that's going on behind the scenes, you don't even see that. You don't see the code happening in real time. Just get out there, have fun. Another thing is, going back to what I was saying about using references, I always have done this, and I don't think there's any shame in doing this, is putting a track up in your DAW that you want to like emulate, and then trying to like find out what makes that sound good and trying to push yourself in that regard, and doing like having it as a ghost track on the top of your DAW. You know what I'm saying? Idea. Just putting it up in your DAW and saying, okay, what's the sound that I'm reaching for, or what's that level that I'm reaching for, and then trying to push your track in that direction, I think can be super helpful.
And for arrangement purposes too, if you want, do the same BPM and then put markers. This is the intro, this is the first verse, or this is the drop, depending on what kind of style.
Even if you don't even have the BPM, I mean, you can still put it up in your DAW and look at it and say, okay,
sure,
this is where this happens. This is where this happens.
Yep, and that's helpful because sometimes it's confusing to know where to go from. You make this cool drop, and then you're like, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, so granted that, it will be a master track. You are listening to a master track versus your track that is not mastered. But all you have to do is just put it into a lane in your DAW and solo it, and then and then unsolo it and turn it and deactivate it and just listen to your track, and so you can reach anywhere close to that level. That's actually really good advice right there too. Way to set the high bar there. So anyway, that's it. I mean, hey, we'd love to hear your questions and concerns. So like if you guys have like questions about this topic or other topics, just like comment on the podcast, send us a message. If you're listening to this in audio form, send us a message. We're here for you. We're the guys that do this for real. We do this full time. So
yeah, and one thing that would be interesting too, maybe if you guys are interested in learning how Chris makes pads, because pads can be very complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically, in long story short, it's we have slow attack, slow release, but there's so much more that goes beyond that,
right? And
the change over time, and I think that'd be cool to pick Chris's brain about that, and maybe learn a little bit more about making pads, because those are fun to make.
Yeah,
they're kind of a big spot of ambient, really.
I think so. Yeah. It's something I got into early. I was like, this is really what I want to focus on. And now that I'm that deep,
it's more of an art form than like disgusting sequences, right?
Well, both can be valid. You know what I'm saying? I've heard some really good music. A good friend of mine and business partner, Don Tyler, recently released a record on our exclusive music label called Aura. And it's freaking blowing my mind, man. It's like, it's not what you think it is. It's like super minimal music that's like, has a lot of space in between the notes and like a lot of crazy high level sound design. And I'm just absolutely addicted to it. I'm so into this stuff. And it's like, he did it on, modular with some like Hydrasynth, and some of it played live, and it's just like crazy, crazy music. It blows my mind. Right. And it can be that simple and that abstract. Like, it doesn't have to be so linear, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to start with a pad. You don't have to start with something. You start with random sounds, and that's one of the beauties of modular and of like doing things by hand, is that you can experiment and try new things. And maybe that could turn into something really cool and abstract.
The happy accidents.
Yeah. So
painting with sound.
Right. So this is an album he's calling Avada. It's on our exclusive label, Aura. We can leave the link down below in the description for this one. It's just really good. It's really good.
And let
music.
that stuff inspire you too, because there's some ideas, like you don't know what you don't know until you listen to something.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a lot of good music out there, everybody. And we look forward to hearing what you guys come up with. So keep us posted.
Yeah, let us know.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and we'll see you in the next one.
If you're interested in supporting the podcast, Please subscribe to the S1gns Of L1fe and Jon audio channels on YouTube. The link for our channels is down below in the description and in the show notes. For the video version of this show, please subscribe to the Harmonic Horizons YouTube channel to keep up with all the latest episodes. For bonus content, including additional podcast material, head over to the S1gns Of L1fe Patreon page. Paid members get access to Beyond the Horizon, our new series of extended conversations with our guests, as well as several other benefits such as early access to all of his videos, exclusive ambient tutorials, over 100 preset packs for various synthesizers, one-on-one coaching for ambient and electronic music, and tons more. If you'd like to support Jon Audio and the work he does, head over to his YouTube channel and subscribe. You can also check out his Gumroad page for a selection of free and paid preset packs. Finally, he has a Patreon page where subscribers get access to additional content, such as exclusive music, presets for various synths such as Pigments and Diva, specialized courses, and more. Harmonic Horizons is hosted on Buzzsprout and is now available on all major platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, and all other major podcast directories. If you'd like to reach out to us or would like to be a guest on the show, you can contact us at harmonichorizonspodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.